Episode 7 of the Handy Homebrew Show. Today, Matt Paulson, we're talking about the mashing process in all-grain brewing.
Very, very important process for the all-grain brewer. This is usually the very first step in the brewing process. First thing I'd like to talk about is equipment. Because, like I've said before, I love equipment.
Now, the equipment, I love toys too. The equipment can be overwhelming at first, but it doesn't have to be.
It is. There's a lot of different choices, you know. In my old setup, I used a 30-quart cooler.
Big boy.
Yep, yeah. I was only doing 5-gallon batches.
But you could get up to 15 and something that size.
Right.
Yeah, you could be a big.
So mine was just the 30-quart cooler. I had a braided stainless steel hose hooked up to a ball lock.
That was your manifold.
Right.
To keep all the grain out during transfer.
Exactly. And, it probably cost me $35 to build.
Not much at all.
Right.
So it's really not that expensive of a step to add, but it's overwhelming. It intimidates people. It really does.
It does. But it's fairly easy to build your own mash tun. Probably one of the first DIY projects that you could do for your own brewery.
It's cheap, it's fast, it's easy. But the most important part is you're doing the same process.
Right.
The goal of mashing is to collect wort. And wort is that sweet sugars from the grain mixed with your water.
Sweet sugar.
That you will be boiling. Then you'll add your hop schedule to it. And then you'll transfer that and your yeast will do its job. But the whole point of a mash tun is to collect wort. That's it.
Right.
So you need a few things like that. You need something to hold temp.
Right.
You need a manifold to keep the grain out of your boil kettle because you can't have grain in there. You just want the sugar from the grain.
Right.
And really, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. You need something to hold temp, and you need it to sit for usually about an hour.
About an hour.
There's different systems, and we'll talk about that a little later. But about an hour is really that's all a mash tun is. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And the reason we like to use a cooler, and of course, any kind of cooler could work. Some of the big cylindrical igloo
like the
coolers.
water ones, the water dispenser.
Right, a big water jug cooler, the 30-quart coolers.
I got one that you just put sandwiches and beer and go to the beach with. That's all I use.
Right.
It was $20 or something like that, and it came with a couple other coolers.
Yeah. Some people actually use just a keg, an old keg, with a false bottom in there. Mm-hmm. Doesn't hold temp real well, but you can add a little bit. You can add temp as time goes by.
And you can insulate it as well. You can wrap it in a little bit of foil insulation. And keep the insulation is important because it takes a little time to extract those sugars, and you want the temperature to hold as steady as possible if you're doing a single infusion mash. That means one temperature. Single means one. We're holding it at one.
Right. You're just going to hold it at one temperature.
For however long it is.
Exactly. Now, it's funny you talk about temps.
I do talk about temps.
Because that's another really important part to the mashing process.
So I can't just use any temp I want?
No.
Can't just pick something random?
No. It'd be fun, though.
No, it probably wouldn't.
No.
I've done it random, and it hasn't worked out well.
A temperature range that we like to use as home brewers, Dustin and I, is between a 148 and a 156.
Yeah, maybe. About 8 degrees.
About an 8.
And it seems small. That seems like a small range when you talk about temperature. But really, there's a lot of different characteristics you can get in an 8-degree range.
Right. So the lower end of that scale, you're going to extract more of the simple sugars. The really sweet sugars that the yeast love.
Boy, they eat those up.
Yes.
And what does that do to your beer, though?
Well, it can give the beer a little bit less body.
It's a little thinner.
It can dry it out a little bit. So since there's so much of that easy, simple sugars for the yeast to eat, it doesn't leave a lot there for mouthfeel, body, and
richness.
Character.
Okay.
Right.
So you go a little bit higher on it, I can get more complex sugars. The yeast have a little bit more trouble deciphering between those. They leave a little behind for some smooth, creamy mouthfeel. Like, for instance, I do my stouts at 158. Or not 158, excuse me, 154. Is where my stouts are. My IPAs and pales are about 151. And I do, for my saisons, I go down to 148. It's a very dry beer anyway.
Because you want it to go really dry.
You want it dry. And I want those sugars, the yeast to be happy with those sugars. So we're looking at an 8-degree range. So you get your water.
Right.
You've taken your amount of grain. You've milled it. It's got to be crushed grain, and we'll do a whole segment on milling. You put it in your mash tun with your manifold that will keep it out, whether it's a false bottom, braided tube. I just have plastic tubing. You can check our videos below. I'll show you how to make one for $3. I put it in there. I mix in my water. Now, the temperature of my water is going to slightly change.
Right.
Because the grain is going to absorb some temperature.
Right.
It's going to absorb some of that water as well for volume and amount. And it's going to drop a little bit. So you got to kind of play around for a little while to see where you're at.
Right. So what I would suggest to anybody that's new and kind of getting into the all grain part of it, one of the things that I picked up very early on was Beersmith.
Oh my!
Now I just got Dustin into Beersmith.
I was like, why do I need a Beersmith? I can do it myself. I am a beer. Holy, this is like crack for beer brewers.
Right.
You can make recipes all night long.
Sure.
And never once make a beer.
Right.
It's fun. It does your grain absorption.
Yeah.
It does your temperature losses. It does your water ratios. You can do water profiles on there. Guys, we could do 15 shows alone on the different tools on Beersmith. It's amazing. I've had it for about a year now. I still haven't touched most of them.
Oh no.
It's so simple still in my brewing process that I'm still going through. I just now got the water profiles about pH levels and stuff. It's amazing. I can customize my water profile. It's a great system.
But what I really love about Beersmith is once you're brewing on your own system and you've gone through a few different brews and you're able to take some of the measurements through the mash process and all the way through to the end. But what it really does is once you fill some of these fields out in the software, you actually can do the same process every single time and actually hit your temperatures, water volumes.
So you can make a profile on Beersmith, plug that in for your equipment, and it will tell you, hey, you need to raise your strike water, which is the first batch of water you mix your grain with, to 167. Because when your grain is 68 degrees, you're going to lose X amount, and that's going to be right where you're at.
Right.
It tells you all that stuff.
So what I did, why I liked it is because I want to focus on recipes. I don't want to focus on fiddling here and fiddling with water temperature and fiddling with these things. If I want to try a beer or a recipe, I want to put the recipe in.
Malt, hops, yeast, water. Boom.
Yes.
Focus.
And I want to focus on my recipe, not so much on how much I have to alter my
Do I need an extra
equipment.
quarter gallon because of dead space? It'll do that. You dial it in.
It does.
Dial in.
Right.
It's fantastic. So the mash tun's job is to hold your grist, your mix of your dry grain and your strike water, which is your first batch of water, at a certain temp. And you'll dial that in depending on what type of beer. So say we're holding at 153, 154 for a stout. We want a nice, creamy, rich milk stout. I hold mine about 60 minutes each time just to make sure I get... But there are different ways to mash. There's different types of mash. I do a single infusion mash and then fly sparge on top of that. And we'll talk about sparge in another episode as well, how to clean your grain to get all of that good sugar. But there's mashes as short as 30 minutes.
Right.
Or people say full sugar conversion is done after 30 minutes.
Right.
There's people who do overnight mashes. Lower temperatures and get all the complex sugars out and let it sit for 12 hours, wrapped up real tight so they don't lose a lot of degrees. And there's other mash techniques out there that you can really fiddle with.
Right. So I would probably say the majority of homebrewers that I know do a single infusion mash.
One temperature.
One temperature. And the reason is a lot of the stuff that I've read about says that, that these grains that we're using today have been so highly modified that there's no reason to do these different rests and different temperature times to be able to extract all of this stuff.
If you wanted to try different temps and during a mash, what type of mash would that be?
Well, that would be called a step mash.
So you could
change
change
there's a couple different ways. So it's step mash. Shout out to my grandfather, guys, because we can do the step mash very, very easily.
Oh, it's me, the grandfather. You come to me and this. That's my grandfather. Yeah, that's pretty good, right? I was in that. I was Marlon Brando. I am Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
Stella makes a good beer. Also.
So with the grandfather, we're actually. It's very easy to do a step mash because we can control our temperature.
And you can recirculate your wort.
Right.
Now in a cooler, I can't recirculate my wort.
Right.
But there's ways in a cooler, like we were talking earlier about decoction.
Right.
Where I can Vorloff my first runnings of my mash off after one temperature, heat that Vorloft amount up, pitch it back in, and then change the temperature of my mash.
Change the temperature.
So I don't have a way to recirculate it, but I can take it out of my ball lock, fill it up, heat it up on whatever I'm going to heat it, put it back in, change the temperature.
Right.
I've done a multi-step mash rate. That's not that hard either. That's not very hard to do either. I have not dabbled enough in the mash process to see how much benefit I would get out of that. And like you said, the grains right now are so, I mean, we can dial in our grains to whatever we want. And there's people that know a lot more about beer brewing than we do that would be like, no, you got to step mash this, you got to step mash that. And I take everything they say, as the gospel. But I myself have never gone, man, I wish this beer I was drinking had more step mashes in it. So it's
I wish I would have step mashed this at 120 degrees for a little
27
while.
minutes into it. It's beer gets a little intimidating at times, and this is where people really can start to split hairs. This is when people start to decide what type of brewer they are. I am this, I am that. But you can't lock yourself down. You got to try new stuff, guys. You got to get out there. You got to say, hey, I've never done a step mash. And I do it, and it's a nightmare, and I hated it, and it didn't make a better beer, so I'm not going to do it again.
Right.
But I can't sit over here and go, oh, step mashing is bad, or single infusion's the best, or fly sparging is better than batch sparging. Because unless you dabble, you got to kind of take everything with a grain of salt.
Well, and some of these different, some of the different ways or techniques may not work well on one system.
Yeah.
And
I can't recirculate.
Right.
You can punch a button and raise yours by 2 degrees in a couple minutes.
Right.
I can't do that. I gotta pull it off. Gotta remove that wort. I gotta heat it up. It's
exactly.
Oh my gosh. So we're talking mash tuns. We're talking the mash step. We are taking grain that we have milled. We have cracked it open. We'll talk different types of milling. We'll talk Corona. We'll talk roller mills. We'll talk hand roller mills. I've seen those too.
Yeah.
You mix that with your strike water, you hold it for 30, 60, 90 minutes, you're collecting wort, you're collecting sweet sugars, you transfer it, boom, mash is done. That's all we got on mash, that's it.
I've got one other thing. I managed to make sure I threw this in here. Something called the mash out.
The mash out. Oh my gosh.
The mash out.
You got to do a mash out.
Some people do, some people don't. The mash out basically is simple as saying raise the mash water temperature to higher than 168 degrees.
Okay.
So it does two things. First, it stops the conversion of the enzymes of pulling the sugars
out. Yep.
Right? And the second thing it does is heats that up to where it loosens the consistency of the liquid.
Okay.
Makes it a little more
flow a little bit better.
Flow a little bit better
the
out of your
viscosity of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Change the viscosity of it. It flows a little bit. Cleans it out. Now that happens when I sparge.
Right.
When I'm sparging, that's what's going on. I'm mashing out.
Right.
You can batch sparge, fly sparge. I don't know. There's a bunch of different sparges. I named most of them right there, though. But we'll do a whole thing on sparging and how we got to mash out. We got to stop that conversion, collect the wort, and start boiling.
Right.
We got to move on to the next step. So that is episode 7. We're talking mashes in episode 7.
I love mashes.
I do the monster mash from time to time. Finishing each other's sentences.
Right.
We practiced that for 3 days, by the way. 3 whole days. So that's pretty much it.
Let's do Pints and Picks.
Pints and Picks? I get to do a Pints and Picks. Coming up is another Pints and Picks. Episode 7, the Handy Homebrew Show. We're doing Pints and Picks. It feels like we haven't done a Pints and Picks in a long time.
Well, we were both under the weather last week.
Well, spring break got me under the weather.
Right.
And it was St. Patrick's week, so... Ooh. But I have been watching movies still. I just want you guys to all be aware we're still watching movies. But this week's Pints and Picks, we're doing a homebrew. My last homebrew didn't go very well. I was trying some things, didn't work out. This right here, Matt Paulson, we have... My first attempt at a rye saison. This is Bill Rye, the saison guy.
Okay.
It's about 7% alcohol. The yeast in this just destroyed its final gravity. It was under 1,000, which is amazing. It's very dry, peppery, spicy, but highly carbonated because saisons are. But let's get in there. Let's see what we got going on.
First thing I noticed right off the bat, just the aroma. A really good aroma, not real strong.
No, it's
kind
of wish it was more though.
Kind of a green apple, like a Granny Smith apple type aroma.
It's got a little fruity ester to that.
Yeah,
I'll tell you one thing.
A little bit of fruit, but I also smell a spice, kind of a spiciness
I think it's a rye. Boy,
peppery.
that rye punches you right in the face.
It does.
So we got a lot of rye aroma. I got a lot of rye in that flavor too. You get the kind of on the back of the tongue, the spiciness of rye. Rye's fun to work with, but boy, I'll tell you, she's a fickle mistress.
Right.
Rye will mess with you. So it's not bad for a first try.
No,
I'll pat
I like
myself
it.
on the back. It's a good drinking beer. I'll tell you though, one problem I have with this, and you guys, we drink a lot of homebrew between the two of us and our friends and everything like that. If you guys ever want us to try a homebrew, you let me know and we'll get a hold of it. We'll talk about how we can get a hold of it. We'll review a homebrew for you right here. But
yeah,
I wish this just had a little bit more oomph to it.
Just a little more body. What was your mash temperature?
I want 148. I go low.
Okay.
I want those simple sugars on mine.
So I think maybe next
we
time
crack up to 150.
Try it up to 150, 151.
The alcohol won't be as high, and the
Right.
alcohol is very high on this. It doesn't taste that way, but it'll.
And if you really want a good a high alcohol, just up your grain bill just a little bit.
Yeah, just
that would help
pound
you
really
out.
good.
Yeah.
Now, you can't drink a rye saison, clean, crisp, nice finish, without talking about the clean, crisp, nice finishes of Keanu Reeves and John Wick. John Wick, Matt Paulson, you've seen John Wick.
I've seen this.
If you like action movies, this might be the best action movie I've ever seen. I went and saw this at the Dollar Show here in town a couple of years ago, and I was like, I'll go see whatever. Sunday afternoon, I'll go by myself. This movie's amazing. It's like 88 minutes long. It's that fast, and it's just nonstop. It's subtle. It's clean. It's simple. It doesn't get too convoluted with all these side stories and everything. It's Keanu Reeves going all around town kicking the Russian mob's ass. That's all he
about
does.
it.
And I apologize to our Russian friends out there if any of you are in the mob. Keanu Reeves is not there. This was my blockbuster take of the year a couple of years ago. This came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Never even heard of it. I was like, I'll go check out John Wick starring Keanu Reeves. Action, adventure, great car chases, great shoot 'em up scenes, great fight scenes. The best part about this, and in all respect to sad Keanu, he doesn't talk much.
No, he
Keeps it very simple, but the one-liners,
7-8 lines.
you can't beat the one-liners in here. They got the best one-liners. So I recommend John Wick. If you can find yourself a farmhouse saison, a Bell saison,
Sure.
go grab yourself a saison, watch a little John Wick, enjoy your evening, stuff like that. I think that's it, man. Paulson.
And we're not beer
Experts.
I screw this up every time.
How do you do that? We're gonna have to write it on a card.
I'm gonna have to write it down. We're not beer experts.
We're just beer enthusiasts.
I just love beer.
He's just the guy. He can't speak. But Melon. You hosting the show, Melon? It's our new host. Melon. You hosting the show? Good job. Like a beer? Good job. You get a beer.